Picture a quiet suburban street in Kansas, the kind of neighborhood where kids ride their bikes in the summer, where neighbors wave to each other, where life feels safe. But behind those white picket fences, in those small, quiet homes, there was a secret, a dark one. For more than 30 years, an unknown man stalked the people of Wichita, Kansas. He terrorized families, played cruel games with the police, and gave himself a chilling name, BTK. Bind, torture, kill. Those three words were not just a nickname, they were a promise. From the 1970s all the way into the early 2000s, the BTK killer seemed untouchable. He murdered at least 10 people, then vanished back into everyday life like a ghost. Police had almost nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no leads. It was as if the killer was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But the BTK killer's downfall didn't come from a brilliant detective or some new crime-solving technology. It came from something so simple, so strange, it almost sounds ridiculous, a floppy disk. And the reason he was caught is because of a single arrogant mistake. Let's go back to the beginning. In January 1974, Wichita police responded to a horrifying scene. The Otero families, a mother, father, and 2 of their children, were found murdered in their home. The father's name was Joseph. The mother's name was Julie. Their young children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, were also killed. Only the older kids, who had been at school that morning, survived. The brutality of the crime shocked everyone. But at first, police thought it might be a robbery gone wrong. That changed when, months later, a letter arrived at a local newspaper. The letter claimed responsibility for the murders. The writer described details only the killer would know. And at the bottom, he signed it with 3 letters, BTK, bind, torture, kill. This was no random act. This was the work of someone who wanted attention, who wanted the world to know what he was capable of. And over the years, more murders followed. In each case, BTK would stalk his victims, study their routines, and then strike. He wrote more letters taunting police, bragging about what he had done, and demanding recognition. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. By the early 1990s, it seemed like BTK was gone for good. Some thought he had died or gone to prison for some other crime. Maybe he just stopped. The city of Wichita tried to move on, but BTK wasn't finished. In 2004, nearly 30 years after his first murder, a local newspaper ran a story about the anniversary of the killings, wondering whatever happened to BTK. And guess who saw it? BTK himself. He couldn't resist. Letters started showing up again. Packages left in strange places around Wichita. BTK was back, older, but just as cruel, and he wanted the world to know he was still out there. But there was a problem. Technology had changed. Police were more advanced now. DNA databases existed, and for the first time, BTK was worried. In one of his letters, he asked the police a strange question. He wanted to keep sending messages, but he didn't want to be tracked. So he asked, if I send you a floppy disk, can you trace it back to me? Now think about that for a moment. Here is a man who managed to evade police for decades, a man who killed without being caught, who fooled detectives year after year, and yet here he was, asking the police for tech advice. The police saw an opportunity. They replied publicly in the newspaper saying, yes, it's safe. No, we can't trace a floppy disk. It was a lie. BTK believed them. In February 2005, a package showed up at a local news station. Inside was a purple floppy disk. Police rushed it to their forensic team, and within minutes, they had something BTK never expected: floppy disks. Even back then, stored hidden data. Every time a file is saved, the disk keeps a record of when and where it was created. On this disk, buried in the digital footprint, was a clue. The disk had been used at Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita, and the last person to edit the file was someone named Dennis. Detectives searched church records and found a name, Dennis Rader. To his neighbors, Dennis Rader was the last person anyone would suspect. He was a 59-year-old man, married with 2 kids. He was a Cub Scout leader. He was the president of his church council. He worked as a compliance officer for the city, writing up people for minor violations like overgrown lawns. He looked ordinary, boring even. But behind that mask of normalcy, he was BTK. Police began surveillance. They needed proof. That's when they discovered Rader's daughter had recently had a medical procedure. Detectives got a court order and secretly obtained a DNA sample from her medical records. When they compared her DNA to evidence collected from the BTK crime scenes years earlier, it was a near-perfect match. That was enough. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested while driving home from lunch. When confronted, he didn't fight. He didn't deny it. In fact, he confessed in chilling detail, describing each murder as if he was proud of it. After 30 years of fear, after decades of taunting, after an entire city was haunted by his shadow, BTK was finally caught, and all because of a floppy disk. Rader was later sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains in prison today. What makes the BTK story so disturbing is not just the murders. It's the double life. All right. To his family, friends, and neighbors, Dennis Rader was a church-going family man. To the city of Wichita, he was a faceless phantom, and for 30 years he was both. But in the end, his arrogance was his undoing. He couldn't resist the spotlight. He couldn't stand the idea of being forgotten, and so he reached out again, desperate for attention. That floppy disk was supposed to keep him anonymous. Instead, it was the digital fingerprint that exposed him. Dennis Rader believed he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he could control the narrative forever, but it was that overconfidence, that one question he asked the police, that brought him down. The BTK killer terrorized a city for decades. He wanted to be remembered, and he will be. But not for what he wanted. He'll be remembered as the monster who thought he was invisible, but was undone by a purple floppy disk. As always, visit us at readtherealstory.com for more true crime tales, mysteries, and chilling stories you won't find anywhere else.